Hello dear friends, in this lesson we're going to do a bit of practice. We're going to implement CI/CD for our project, setting up a workflow so that GitHub Actions deploys our project to the server. We'll be using the repository that you've already seen in previous lessons. It's a template for building websites on WordPress. Based on it, I'll show you how to implement simple CI/CD and deploy to a production server. I chose this repository on purpose because it's an old repository. To make it work, you need Node.js version 12 and an old version of npm. He runs various commands. And for this reason, I wanted to demonstrate how to set up a specific version of Node.js based on it, even though you already know this from previous lessons. This repository is private, but I'll archive its source code if you want to practice hands-on. You can do that without any problem. Today, I'm recording the lesson. I'll show you how the project works for file understanding. This way, you'll grasp the workflow steps. Alright, let's get started. So, in the first part of the lesson, I'll tell you and show you how the project works, so you understand what these files are responsible for and how it's generated. This way, you'll grasp the steps of the workflow and why they are set up the way they are. Alright, let's get started. Let's clone this repository to our local machine. Let's open it in the editor and take a look at the structure a bit. So, this is the GitHub folder. In it, we have the workflow for deploying this project to the production server. We're going to work directly with this file. Next, the .rv folder. Here I have a technical file for setting up PHP. I'm not using any local server. I'm using Docker to generate the PHP database. PHPMyAdmin is my tool to interact with the database. Next, the src folder. So, in this folder, I have the source code for the entire project. They are divided into two directories, to the theme directory and to the plugin directory. So, this is a starter theme for WordPress. Just a reminder, if you've worked with WordPress, you know that themes are where HTML, CSS, and JS are written, all that relates to the appearance. And if we have any functionality, according to the rules, it should be written in a separate plugin, meaning a separate plugin is created for that. And since the theme and the plugin in WordPress are stored in different locations, I created a structure where I can edit everything from one project, meaning both the plugin and the theme are in the same editor, so I can work with them. But during the deployment stage, when I send it out, I'll even show you because there's a basic CI/CD setup here. I send the theme folder to one location and the plugin folder to another location, which is really convenient. Next, while editing and working on the site, it's also very convenient because in the Docker file, I specify where the theme is located and where the plugin is, and it also organizes the folders into the necessary directories. Now, the next point is that Docker must be installed on the system for this site to work. Node.js also needs to be installed since this is an old project. It's set up for Node version 12. I specifically chose this one to set up the CI/CD on version 12. If you run it on a different version, like 20, which is the current one, then the dependencies will have various warnings and it won't work. So this project won't run. Docker is essentially responsible for the launch, and we also briefly looked at this file in the Docker compose YAML file. Also, a volume is used for the database, and the volume allows us, for example, before the first launch, to create a WordPress site, and a database will be created. If I change some data in the admin panel, then on the second launch, it will pull from the cache of these volumes, and I'll have to create the WordPress database every time. Alright, basically, we're not really interested in how this specific project works in this lesson, since you might not even be working with WordPress at all. You could be using React or something else, or maybe you're not even developing websites. Here, the focus is more on the fact that there's a project that requires certain commands to be run for it to work, and we execute these commands through instructions in the workflow. Let's run the first command. So the first command, docker compose upd, will simply bring up the containers. If this is the first run, it will create them. If it's the second run, it will just start them up. So right now Docker should be running. I have Docker running, so I can go ahead and type in this command. I'm opening the terminal and typing in the command. Notice that it creates and starts, and if I open Docker, I see that a container is created and it has 4 images in it. These are the images that run as services: WordPress, PHP, MyAdmin, MySQL, and MailHub. Alright, now let's check what the default node version is by running node version. So, it's currently set to 18. I said I need 12, so npm use 12. Switching, version 12. And therefore npm is already at version 6 in the system. So, for this project to work, you need to have node version 12, specifically 12.22.12, and npm version 6.14.16. Let's run it one more time. 22.12 and npm 6.14.16. Let's run it one more time. Check the node version to make sure, yes, it's really version 12. The next command we're going to run is npm install. These commands that I typed in, npm use, are for you to understand how to switch to node version 12. npm install will take a few minutes to install all the dependencies and specs. npm. It's installed and the node modules folder has appeared. In the next step, the next command, we can proceed to directly execute the entire project itself. We're starting it. To ensure everything is set up correctly, we should thoroughly review the documentation. After that, it's important to execute the command npm run watch. This command is essential as it will initiate and continuously monitor the project, ensuring that any changes are automatically compiled and updated. Everything is great. Now the site is available at the link localhost. This way, if I open it, I see the local site on localhost. The first time, of course, you need to create a database, so we're creating it. So, under no circumstances should you do what I'm doing right now with real sites like admin and root. This is only for a local machine because brute force will hack your site in the blink of an eye. Any bot will do it. You could just create a new site, not even put a link to it anywhere yet, but bots will already be scanning it. Various bots. So, first of all, it's not recommended to use admin as a username, and especially to have such a simple password. Here I am on my local machine, I can afford it. Alright, great. So, I currently have a WordPress site running on my local machine. I don't have any additional software. Docker is just running, and with just a few commands we've got this site up and running. Next, this site has a starter theme that I'm activating, and plugin, which is also Alifm Core. I'm activating it now, so both the theme and the plugin are successfully activated and we can work with the site. For example, in the footer, yes, I'll add a word test. It compiles, and pay attention to why this compilation is needed, because for instance our styles are built in such a way that they use the less preprocessor. They're split into different files, and in the end they all compile into one file called custom.css. There's a similar system for JS, where there are separate libraries and files. For example, here we have the index.js file, which ultimately compiles into main.js. So there's a special structure that performs various manipulations, and when a file is changed, the npm modules compile them, and everything they compile is placed in this destination folder and the theme folder. The main theme folder directory. The plugin folder is already compiled, so our task at the deploy stage is to take the theme folder from the destination and put it into the theme, and to take the files from the plugin folder and put them into the plugin folder on the live site. We wrote, for example, the word test. Let's see. No, that's not it. So I also set up the production server separately, outside of the video, to save time. It will be available at this link. So these two links are for our production site, where we will be uploading our local site. And let's check the local site. Let's take a look. There it is, our word test that we wrote. WordPress is available to us. So what else should I demonstrate here before we start the deploy? Let's demonstrate that, for example, I'm killing the console. Basically, I just deleted the compilation and took down the server. So the site is not going to work. I can close Docker and then open it again. So here's my Docker container. Let me just go ahead and stop all these commands that are currently running and executing. That's it, I just stopped it. And when I start it again, I'll open a new terminal. Docker compose update. This is the first command to bring up the containers. Great, they started up, and the second command is npm run watch to launch the compiler and in general to start the local server. Alright, now let's go back to the site, refresh it, and as you can see, the database is all there, everything is in place, all the changes we've made, even the selection of the theme that we activated, everything stays where it should be. Wonderful. Now that you've seen how this project starts and works, we can move on to writing the workflow. To do the deployment, as you already know, we need a workflow. We create the workflow in the .github directory. And in it, there's another directory called workflows. And in there, we create our YAML files that contain the actual instructions. Next, we set the instruction. Let's say our instruction will be called CI/CD. This is how we will use the name. Next, we set the event. We set the event using the key on. As you remember, there are different types of events. Some are repository based and some are manual. Usually, if it's a very simple site, meaning you rarely make changes to it, like in my case, I work directly with the main branch for such sites. So, if it's some kind of quick business card site and I need to push changes, I work directly through main, which is why for such projects, I use push branch on main as the event. So, we will use it exactly the same way here. But if it's a more complex site that you've been working on for a longer time, then for such sites I usually don't touch the main branch. I create separate branches for each feature, for example for individual pages. Specific options like page about or feature contact and so on. Different branches are created, then a pull request is made and merged with main. In this case you can set a different condition as the event, but in my case it's just a push to main because this instruction needs to be as simple as possible. After we determine the event, we need to decide on the job. Using the key jobs, we define the jobs, and in this case our first job is to build. We need to execute the build of the project, which means what we've just done on our local machine to get this destination directory, because by default we don't have it in the repository. So when we download this directory into the repository, it's not a site yet. It's basically just files that need to be prepared and compiled. That's what we'll do in the build. To perform the build, we need to decide on the virtual machine, and Ubuntu is more than enough for us. I just built it on macOS because I'm currently on macOS and all the Node.js infrastructure and everything else is set up on macOS. But we can easily do this on Ubuntu. Next, we set the steps, step by step. The first step, I would clone the repository. So I'm bringing this up as the first step. We set a name, for example, clone repo, and as you remember from the previous lessons, the fourth version for checkout is relevant. To clone the repository files into the working directory on the machine, we simply use uses and the name of the action checkout. Next, in the second step, we need to set up the environment. We need a specific version of Node, so we use setup Node.js environment as the title for the step, and for the action, we use setup Node action version 3. Let's check if there's a new version. Yes, the fourth version is relevant. And one more parameter, guys, I'm going to set, when we use this node, we can cache npm right with this action. So, I'm basically passing the parameter not version 12, and I'll also essentially pass the parameter to cache npm, so it caches npm. We've set up all the infrastructure, and now we need to install the dependencies to ensure everything is ready and functioning properly. So let's make a step for npm install modules and run the command in our development environment before proceeding to the next steps for a smooth and efficient workflow. After that, our dependencies were installed. Note that I don't have any Docker containers running here because Docker containers are only used for me to set up WordPress, and I could access it through the browser. I don't need Docker to compile the code so that code from SFC gets to the destination. That's why I don't even run a Docker container on my work machine, and I don't use Docker at all. I only use npm to compile files. This is important, so there will be no Docker team here. If in the future I need, I don't know, testing something using some services that let me open a site in a browser and check if it throws any errors, if I find some servers like that, then I can do it without any problems. Since all this code runs under Docker, I can run it anywhere, including on this virtual machine, and I can conduct some tests with additional workflows and instructions. At this stage, I don't have any tests, and none are being conducted. Of course, we can look for some error tests in the code, run some checks, but we don't have that right now, and we won't be doing it either. Basically, it's clear. We've completed the step of installing the modules. The next step is to run the build. So, we ran npm run watch on the local machine. There's a similar command, but it's called npm run build. Production. That's prod. It does the same thing. Just compiles the files into those directories. So we don't need Docker on the server, and there's nothing related to Docker in this command. We're not bringing up the site to open it. There are so many files being compiled, so to run this build, I use npm run prod instead of npm run watch. And it will compile the necessary files for the project and all the related dependencies. That's it. So, regarding these steps, everything is basically clear and all the necessary details. Now, at this moment, we're not deploying yet. This is the build process step. Let's take a moment to print each of these elements to the console, allowing us to carefully examine and verify whether everything is functioning correctly and in proper order as expected. Let's run the command run in order to successfully execute the command. As you may already be aware, the command known as ls will effectively list out all of the files that we currently have, and we should have the destination directories. Let's go ahead and commit, or rather commit and push these changes and take a look at the workflow execution. They're not being sent anywhere on the server at this moment in time. They're not being sent to any location on the server. We're committing the changes. The changes have been sent. Let's take a look. Great. The action is starting. Let's go into action and look at it step by step. We have an error at the setup Node.js environment step. He says the log file is not found. The problem is that we passed the npm cache. It checks for changes in the log file, but my log file, as you can see, is gray, which means it's not being sent to the server because it's in Gitignore. Let's remove this package.log.json from here since we included the cache, and it checks specifically against that. We also used this file in the lessons, so now let's run this again and see. So at the step of setting up the specific version of Node, it couldn't complete that. Let's remove this package.log.json from here since we included the cache, and it checks specifically against that. We also used this file in the lessons. So now let's run this again and see. That is, specifically, during the process of configuring nodes of a particular software version, he encountered difficulties in achieving this task. He was unable to do this. Let's wait for the current build to finish. Please note that the process is currently in progress, and we should be patient as it completes. At this stage, notice that Node has started successfully, and we are also successfully getting the files. Now it will finish completely, and I'll be able to jump on it and comment. Great, our build has just finished. Alright, it basically finished here. Something is blinking, so let's go in like this, yeah? So, the job started, the infrastructure started, the step with git clone repo was completed successfully, all files from the repository went to the working machine. Now next is simply the step for setting up Node version 12. Great, It activated 12.22.12. Everything went perfectly. The npm cache is not found, which means this was the first cache run, and there was none. Upon the next run, logically, it should pull files from the cache, and we can check that now. The next step is install node modules, which means it runs npm install, and everything installs successfully. Then there's the build up step where it tries to build by running the command npm run production. As we can see, it compiled successfully. And here's the list of files that were compiled and sent to the destination folder. When we output the log files, we see the destination folder, which by default wasn't there, but now it appears. So we have the results of the command execution. Therefore, we can proceed with the next steps. Taking files from the destination folder, we can create artifacts for the plugin for the theme, or we can just take the source files from the directory and directly upload the source files to the production server, and then the workflow finishes with its various steps. For example, it tears down the Node.js infrastructure, removes the Git clone that was running, and completes the work. At the step when it tears down Node.js, it also creates a folder with the cache, which we can retrieve on the next run using this key. And then the workflow finishes with its various steps. For example, it tears down the Node.js infrastructure, removes the Git clone that was running, and completes the work. At the step when it tears down Node.js, it also creates a folder with the cache, which we can retrieve on the next run using this key. It's about 27 megabytes. So, the next step should take less time than the current one. Next, the second step, or rather the second part, is that we need to perform the deployment. We have one job logically, which is the build, where we build. As I said, we can create artifacts or we can choose not to, depending on the result of the build. And at the second step, we need to deploy. I wouldn't recommend creating a new job for the deployment, specifically for this current project, because it's very short and very simple. Why? Because if we launch another JOP now, it means we will have to launch another infrastructure. This is additional time, and the steps are on their own. They are executed sequentially, and all these current steps will be executed. We will already have ready files. We can send them to the production server in the next steps if for some reason some step does not work, then we do not have a continuum error here, and it will simply exit and it will not reach the step to send some crooked files to Sega. So I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but we have an additional parameter, for example, continuum error. Continuous error is added when, even if this step fails, for example, if it can't install version 12, it will still continue to run successfully. But we don't have such cases if this step fails, or production returns an error, then the entire workflow will fail, and it won't reach the deploy stage. So, I recommend just using steps here and not creating an additional deploy step. And in this build, it can be renamed to build and deploy, and comprehensive process effectively and efficiently to ensure success. And with this, we hit two birds with one stone. Instead of the logging step, we'll start a new step to carry out the deploy. So here, we will be copying files from the working directory to the workstations from the destination folder, the theme and plugin to the production server. We can use it as an action. Here we have a sample. This is the action that I plan to use. He uses an SSH key. There's another sample. In one case, we can connect using a key with a pair of private and public keys to access the server. So here's this sample. There's another way when we connect to the server using a username and password, but still via SSH. But I won't be using them. You can use them too. I want to consider another way, something more interesting, specifically connecting using FTP. To make this happen, I first need to install the plugin so that the command works. And then we'll run the FTP command. I prepared the code that I'm going to use now, and I'll comment on it. We'll have a separate step that will install LFTP so that the LFTP command can be used to upload files via the command line, and this will help us with that. I'm installing it on the machine, and as the second parameter, I'm copying the files, and now we'll figure out the command. Let's run the command. Next, we pass parameters with this array so that all SSL, disabling SSL certificates, accept nothing. Next, we create a mirror, meaning we'll be copying everything from the destination folder, and in our case, that's the destination for everyone. We also need to specify the path on the server. I uploaded the file since I created a separate user using FTP, so I connected, and here's the route where I connected, basically the route of the site for all this data. Host, username, password. I created secrets. So the path where I need to drop this is the starter. I'm copying this. I'm coming back here. Instead of target, I'm passing it. And finally, have the starter. By means that after the file copying is done, just exit. Delete means that we need to remove everything that's in the starter folder. 20 means you can transfer 20 files in one stream, and so on. Next, I need to set the user and 3 parameters for the user. This is the username, this is the password, and this is the host. I created 3 secrets. Put this data into the secrets, and I'm calling them through the secrets. So this command calls, well, actually 2 of our commands. First, an additional tool is installed, which I'll use to copy to the server. Let's test this out now. Just make sure to check carefully if I specified the source from FEM and the destination folder. Yes, I specified everything correctly. Let's run commit and push. Let's just go to action, then simply to deploy and wait for this command to finish. Notice that node.js initialized in just a few moments, around 5 seconds. Installing the dependency took 15 seconds. Our app was built in 3 seconds. So, essentially, the cache is working very well and everything is happening quite quickly. Next, the tool is installing perfectly and smoothly. And now there's a command that's successfully attempting to upload all files from the destination.fm directory to the hosting via the FTP user that I provided by me. The completion was successful. Everything has been copied to the server. The command was executed successfully. Let's take a look. This is our website. And we'll check in the admin panel if we have a new theme. There it is, the new theme, and we can activate it and we can see it on the site. Wonderful. Now we just have one small step left to do the same for the plugin directories. We write this command, copy plugins files to server, and we'll change the path to the plugin because, as you can see, in the destination plugin, the path on the WordPress site starts from the root, WB content plugins, and we need to create a directory for the plugin. I don't have to create it here. The FTP will create it automatically, but I need a key for that. Now let's come up with a key for it. I cannot create it here and FTP will create it itself, but I need a key for it. Now let's come up with a key for it. Usually the index file typically corresponds to the name, so for the ICD, I, generally speaking, use core as the name, and everything else stays the same. Also, we'll check. We wrote a test in the footer here, so let's remove that part and write hello world like this, and then we'll run the final deploy. The final deploy is starting, so let's wait for it to finish and then test on the site to see if everything was successful. As a rule, in general, this is the standard procedure. This job was completed very quickly for us, so we will go to the site, go to the admin panel, go to the plugins, see if we have ALE plugin. Yes, here it is. Attention, we are on the production server. We have an help plugin. We will also activate it. We're not activating the theme since we already did that in the previous step. And if we go to the front end, instead of test, we now see hello world. This is how it's done with simple instructions. We ended up with a very simple file, but it automates a lot of actions that we would have had to do manually. So now we can forget about tools like FileZilla, but of course, we shouldn't completely forget about it. We still use it from time to time. But the fact is, let's update the plugins folder here. Let's go into it. Let's go into it. Like this, update, now to update. And now you see it's pulling in files that were uploaded. You don't need to manually transfer anything like this anymore. 2 commands. Which automatically and seamlessly uploads them to GitHub using FTP efficiently. I don't always use that exact command. I use it more often with an action, but there was a case when the action stopped working. I replaced it with another action. That second action stopped working too. And since then I have been thinking about using this FTP command, which will send these files to the server directly through the console. To summarize, in this tutorial we saw a real project that runs on WordPress, and it requires running a few commands to run, such as restoring package dependencies and running production. We did that. We set up the environment to use Node version 12, enabled caching, and learned how to use the command line to send files via FTP to the production server. So, all the changes we make in real time for our site in the editor essentially happen only in the SRC folder. We make some changes, and at the moment we push to the main branch, they get sent to the production site. This is convenient because while we're working on our local machine, we don't send anything or write anything. We write something, and we see it on the local site. You see, under localhost, I change the footer again. I see it. If there are no errors, everything's fine. I'm pushing to the main branch. In a few minutes, it will be on the production site. And this is the simplest implementation of CI/CD for the project. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.